Let me see. Where do we pick up today?
Ruth 3.
Ruth 3.
So we should recap where we've been in Ruth. What happened the first 2 chapters? Real quick. Go ahead, Rachel.
So this seems sort of like a random narrative, but remember we ended Judges, which was there's no king, and the Israelites were doing whatever they wanted to do in their own eyes.
Yeah.
And it was not good. So we get to Ruth, and it's a story about these Israelites who have to leave Israel and go to foreign lands because there's a famine. But then Naomi's husband and then her 2 sons die. So it's just her daughter-in-laws, Ruth, and I forgot the name of the other one because she's not here later.
Not as important.
Not as important because she goes back to her people because Naomi tells them to go back to your people. And Ruth says, no, I'm going to go where you go, and your people are going to be my people, and your God is going to be my God. I mean, just this loyal love to Ruth that's really extraordinary because she doesn't know, like we've talked a lot about how for women, if you don't have a male protector, if you don't have sons or a husband, and certainly if you're a foreigner, I mean, that's poverty. That is an unknown future. But she was still that loyal to her mother-in-law. So they return. And I think we ended with her going out to the fields to glean, which was part of God's law to protect the poor, was to let them glean in the fields. And so she goes to the fields of Boaz, who happened to be a kinsman of Naomi's family. Is that where we ended?
Yep.
Okay. So that's where we are.
And what we see in Boaz is kind of like a different character than what we've seen up to this point in terms of the men that we've been reading about in terms of their...
Especially in Judges.
Judges. That's what I meant. But their faithfulness to God or godly men.
Mm-hmm. He protects her instead of abusing women who are vulnerable. He says, no man touch her, give her, make sure she gets more than she even thinks she's going to get. So he is already, without knowing her, without her asking him, he is already a protector.
Yeah. Okay, so here I would say here we pick up with this other weird scene of these I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, but these men who are maybe they're drinking and then lying down and then women sneaking around and oh my God, what's going to happen?
Yeah, it sounds like a bad movie.
Yeah. But
it is worth noting though, culturally after the harvest, they celebrate because you've been provided for, the land has provided. And so, it's a big celebration after hard work.
And he's celebrated, so he's I guess Naomi tells Ruth to go do this.
That's right.
She's like, hey, it's kind of disguise yourself or hide yourself and go lay down at his feet
I think disguise yourself so that other people don't see you sneaking around.
Yeah.
You don't have a reputation.
Yeah. But it's just a weird...
It does seem weird, and there's been lots of different interpretations of it. What is really going on here? But the gist of it is that she realizes, hey, this is a kinsman redeemer. This is one who, according to the law, could redeem our family, our inheritance, our name, our future.
Yeah.
And so you go, but don't let anyone see you because they're going to be like, what are you doing? What's going on? You just go and you basically offer yourself in marriage to Boaz. And then he will take it from there because he'll know exactly what's going on. That's what happens.
All this is also connected to what you read in the first 5 books. The way that the Lord establishes when the people go into the land, that the land will belong to the family in perpetuity. So even if after a certain amount of time you sell off your land, there is this year of Jubilee every 50 years where everything gets reset and families that's right, it comes back to you. And so even though Naomi and her family moved to Moab, they still have a right to this land, and her husband has died. So that's how all this is at play. There is still a family claim.
Yeah.
It's a family claim because you don't lose your land, and it's also a way to protect those who are vulnerable, which I think is important because when we sort of look at the law, sometimes we're like, oh, there's these weird laws about not wearing certain fabrics together or eating certain ways. But really, the law, which we've talked about, is how to image who God is, His character. This is what it looks like to be His people. This is what it looks like to live under His rule, and that is protecting the weak. And it is making sure that everyone is cared for and has a future. And so the law was supposed to protect those people, but it didn't always work out.
Yeah.
As you can tell, because somebody says, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
Too high of a cost.
Yep. So then ultimately Boaz goes through whatever the process is here of like being like, okay, no, I'm gonna actually I don't know.
Well, he says
What's the
there's one
official
closer.
thing?
I mean, he says, I am. Well, first of all, he recognizes her faithfulness to do this. It is a very bold move.
And he gives her extra barley.
I don't think we need to look at
right?
this as like it's can be seen as inappropriate. Like, is she offering herself to him? But it really is this. It was very bold and a scary thing for her to do, even more scary than just going to glean from his field. But it was in faithfulness to what the Lord has said should happen, and also to her mother-in-law. I mean, she still's a foreigner and a vulnerable woman, and she's doing this because he could have harmed her in that moment. And instead, he says, well, you are so faithful. You are a noble woman, and I will redeem you, but there's someone who's closer, so let's make sure this is the right process.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. He goes through the other guy, like basically he buys. I forget.
Even before that, I just appreciate what you see in his heart when he says, "You have made this last kindness greater than the first, and that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich." Like, she could improve her position any number of ways, and he, in his humility, considered her approaching him as some kindness.
Yeah,
like that you would choose me.
Yeah, and in doing that, because he's a kinsman, she's protecting Naomi.
That's right.
And not just herself.
Yep.
Because she could have just married into a new family and just been a part of their inheritance, but she still is thinking about her husband who's passed away, his family and name and future.
Yeah.
So then
in chapter 4 is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
They go through that whole like I don't want to say like legal process, but maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, definitely.
And then they get married.
Yeah, so there's one who he says, "Oh yeah, I'll do it." And then they say, "Okay, so you have to buy this land, and then also there's this wife." And he's like, "Oh, never mind, I cannot.
Yeah.
That's going to cost too much," because they had to buy back the land, but then he wouldn't really own it because it's going to go to Ruth's sons.
Yeah.
And, he also, the foreigner Ruth. I mean, that's all throughout this, the Moabite who is Ruth. So I think those two things together, he was like, I don't think so.
Yeah, there being a way made for the outsider to come.
He'd be marrying a foreign wife, and he also, his kids wouldn't receive that inheritance. It'd be someone else's sons in their name.
Yeah, the work he would have to put in to make all of this successful ultimately wouldn't continue on in his family.
Yeah, it's that great, the kinsman redeemer, it's a great cost. It's not just acquiring land, it's really sacrificing and giving so other people have a future and are redeemed.
And wait, isn't there a whole storyline later on that we're like building up to that is that exact same thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the picture of how God's people are supposed to care for one another and provide for one another and love one another. It's an outwardly focused life because of your devotion to Yahweh and what He's done. He's an outwardly focused God.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, Naomi says, they say to her, he shall be to you a restorer of life. I mean, that is what a kinsman redeemer does, and it is who Jesus is for us. I mean, he is the son who redeems God's children back into the family. So we're lost, we're outsiders, we don't have our inheritance, but at great cost, he redeems us back into the family of God, where we're sons and daughters and have a future and a hope. So it is this little foreshadowing picture, not just of David, which we're going to talk about, but of the true kinsman redeemer who gives life.
And it was interesting here, just even at the end, like it's like this add-on, like all of a sudden, like where they get into this genealogy of David. It just really emphasized or highlighted that this isn't something that stands alone, that is really tied to something else. Like this was a story set in this narrative to really lead and build somewhere else.
Yep.
Yeah, it's the history of how King David, the most famous, the idealized king, where he comes from. And it's also this picture of what a king should look like.
Yeah.
So I think we're supposed to be seeing both of those things in here.
And to your point, Like the book of Ruth is included in the scriptures, and I think it's easy to read it isolated from everything else and see the examples of kindness and the examples of loyalty and the way God is working behind the scenes and all of that. But if you only look at it in an isolated way, that's all you'll take from
Yep.
it. If you see it in the grand picture,
Yep.
it's how what's included in the scriptures is part of a larger thing of God from the very beginning wanting to restore people to himself.
Yeah.
And that's why the genealogy is there,
Yeah.
because we get to the line of David.
It's this link between Judges and then 1 Samuel.
Yeah. So wherever you find yourself in the scriptures, whatever page you open up to, it is part of a grand
Yep.
story.
You know,
And it is important, I think, because we're going to talk about Hannah too. You know, there's this widow and how they are hoping for sons and futures, and then we're going to get to Hannah. And I don't want anyone to like mishear any of this. Like you have to have children to be part of God's story, or like if like God will give you this if you just are faithful. But this is a specific thing that's going on because it's about the promised seed who was to come, right? That's part of our big picture narrative. So this is God's story of the Messiah who's coming. But it is also a good reminder that God is working in the mundane, that, our suffering and our triumphs are both, they seem mundane to us because this is like a farmer and a foreigner. And then God, God's very own son, our Messiah, is going to come from this line.
Yep.
Because of their loyalty and their love and their faithfulness. So.
All right, that gets us into 1 Samuel, which, get through all these pages right quick. How is Ruth? Where's that rank in your favorite list?
Ooh, Ruth is
top 10.
Ruth is top 10. It's
I would bet top 10 for
really
Ruth,
really
yeah.
good. It's good.
Yeah.
There's so much there. I mean, really, there's so much there. I was just thinking, all right, we should do a Bible study about Ruth. It's so good. I mean, even just the fact that Ruth is a foreigner. So, I mean, just like not having a son doesn't seem like a big deal to us, it is a big deal in that culture because it's your life. That's just the culture they lived in. Foreigners, that's not, I mean, they're not supposed to marry foreigners, right? That's part of God's plan for them because he's trying to protect them from idolatry and looking like they're the nations. But the fact that the promise is always not just for foreigners and outsiders, but he includes them this intimately within his salvation plan is such a beautiful picture. She's a Moabite, and she is the great-grandmother of King David.
Yep.
That's amazing.
When you flip all the way to the New Testament, the Gospel of Matthew starts the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. It goes on, and you get to verse 5. And Salmon, the father of Boaz, by Rahab, who was a prostitute.
Mm-hmm. A foreign prostitute
who was brought in. And Boaz, the father of Obed, by Ruth. And Obed, the father of Jesse, Jesse, the father of David the king.
Yeah.
Like those two women, outsiders, in one case, destitute and poor, in another, living a lifestyle that you would think would not be included in the genealogy of the Messiah, the point of this whole grand narrative. But these women are included.
Which is really, I think, a great segue into 1 Samuel, because one of the themes, is this okay?
Yeah.
Of 1 Samuel is, which we'll see in Hannah's song, but it is about how God, he exalts the humble. He chooses the humble who are faithful and surrender to him to work through and to exalt.
Well, it's funny you even say that. He's going to use who he uses, and it's who he uses.
That's right.
In spite of their humbleness, arrogance, whatever. But
that's right. He uses anything for his purposes. Yeah. But there is this, he has a pattern of choosing those who are not the firstborn,
the least likely,
who are the foreigner, who are the, not high in stature in the world's eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. And we even saw in Judges, the Spirit of God was moving even in Samson, who, over and over again. God works even through bad people.
Yeah.
Yeah. The ESV Study Bible has this note in the beginning, just kind of setting up the book of 1 Samuel. And so I put that here in my notes. The book of 1 Samuel establishes the principle that the king in Israel, so we know we're headed toward a king because Judges created that tension for us. The king in Israel is to be subject to the word of God as conveyed through his prophets. In other words, obedience to the word of God is the necessary condition for a king to be acceptable to the God of Israel.
So maybe
That's really important.
Yeah, I'm probably jumping ahead to on some other stuff that because this First Samuel begins in the time of still the judges.
Yep.
So it's not
Yes.
like that's
It's like
over.
the end
That's
of that, yes.
the
It's
end
like
of
this
it. Still-
transition. The very
it's-
beginning is this
yeah.
transitional moment, and we see the rise and then eventually the fall of the monarchy. But
Yeah.
it is
Because ultimately, the last judge is it
Samuel.
Samuel?
It's Samuel.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we also see an interesting thing.
He's priest.
or his
He's
sons or
priest.
something.
He's judge. He's prophet.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
There you
he
go.
is a really, really important character. It's why, like, how God, brings his even existence about and then calls him is really important because he plays a really important role. This transition role.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, there's a lot in here to get going, but we're introduced to some of these like different characters. There's this guy who's got these two wives, and he goes to this place. And
One who
there's a priest.
it's like very similar to other stories, right? He
Yeah.
has two wives. One has children. The other one's the one that he really favors.
Yeah.
But she has no children. Anytime we've seen so far
Yeah.
in this story that we're reading of this woman who cannot have children, you sort of know, oh, God's about to do something.
Yeah.
So it's sort of this, oh, we know this pattern.
Yes. Which is, I don't know, maybe there's something to that.
It is in
sure.
this story, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I want to be careful because, like, with fertility issues, like, that's not about, like,
Yeah.
if you're infertile, it's because God doesn't want you to have kids or unfaithfulness. This is just about this story. So, like, a woman who is brought to your attention who is infertile, that is a marker for God's about to move in the life.
Yeah, and that's a
of
good
the
point. Like
people.
we're reading these stories that took place in a completely different world
Yeah.
than we live in, with different values. And so, like Rachel said earlier, a son, children are a way to secure your future.
Yeah.
That's not the case for us today, here at least in the place we live, where we hold children up as a joy and a good gift, but not necessarily securing our future.
So you're going to say, like, as idols.
Well, yeah,
We
I mean,
worship.
that actually came to mind, but I was like, I'm not going to go there.
Don't
We
go
don't have
there.
time. We're going to do this parenting series that's
Yeah.
going to talk about that.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think as I read that, you really get a sense here, and maybe more so, or maybe it's just where I was, but like how the struggle that she had, and like even like the
The priest.
Hannah.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say the priest thinking she's drunk because she was.
Oh, yeah,
she was
because
so.
yeah,
she was
she's-
grieving
Yeah.
so much and so
Yeah.
passionate that he said, "You're drunk." She's like, "No, I'm just crying out."
Yeah, and even the interaction of like her, I don't know how you say the husband's name.
Oh gosh, when he's like, "Oh, I'm better than 10 sons."
Yeah,
Right,
was
yeah.
that how he said it? I guess
classic-
I read that.
classic
come on,
man
come
right
on,
there,
dude.
yeah.
What am I like? Am I chopped liver? But like,
He's like, and she's like, "No, I still want."
Right.
Yeah, it's like no, you're not good enough. I want.
Yeah, it's
sons.
a really great story, and it should make us think about not only Sarah and Rachel, but also Abraham, because even before God asks, she says, "If you will give me this son, I will give him to you. I will give him back to you."
Yeah.
So God doesn't even say, like, "Okay, it's from me, and are you willing to give your future and your hope?" Because remember, that's her future and hope. And she says beforehand, "I'll do it," and then she does. It's just really amazing picture of faithfulness and sacrifice on her part.
Yeah.
And trust.
Yes, and trust.
Yeah, I so want a son for all the reasons we've described, but I trust you that if you give me this son, I'm going to give him back to you because you are the one that provides for me.
Yep.
Pink shirt day.
Gosh. Okay, so Hannah has this experience with the Eli, and he's
a high
like,
priest.
He's the high priest, and ultimately he's like, okay, no, I go home, like, and she ends up going home and ends up getting pregnant bears
He
a
says,
son.
"Oh, okay. Like I see.
Yeah.
Like I hope this happens for you.
Yeah.
So go home." And then
So then she has a son.
she does have a
This
son.
is-
God
this
gifted a
is
son.
Samuel. Samuel's dad wants to go back, and because it's like
They go back every year.
They lead you. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like
I mean,
every year.
She says,
kind
"For
of
this
thing.
for this child I prayed, and the Lord granted me my petition that I made to Him." I really again just want to be careful because sometimes we read in our own cultural issues and expectations, and this is a very specific story about the transition from judges to kings and God moving to bring about a monarchy, and it really isn't about fertility. And so it's not that we can't pray for children and God doesn't hear our prayers and sometimes give us children, but that's not the point of that
Right.
Yeah.
verse.
I don't know. You got me distracted.
Sorry.
That's all right.
So then she has this.
Yeah, but ultimately, they go back, but she's like, no, I'm not going to take him yet. He's not old enough because I'm sure she realizes, like, dude, this is what I said that I would,
Yeah. But she just has to wean him, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not going to bring a newborn and give him to
the next
to this
time they
fat
go,
high priest.
the fat high priest.
Yeah.
That was funny later on when you read about it. It's like
He was very heavy.
He was a big guy.
Yeah.
And he sits outside the door. He's like
Of
got
the
his
gate, yeah.
the gate into the temple or the
But then she
place where they
does.
worship.
She brings him and
Yeah.
presents him to the Lord. And then she has this beautiful song.
Yeah, so why don't we spend a little bit talk through this song? I mean, you had mentioned in a text that we're going to talk about. I don't know if you want to bring that up or what are some of the significant things about this prayer or this kind of song that we see here? It's got a lot of interesting themes that I feel like, we've read this before, and so are we reading things that are quoting this or like I've heard this before? Because this is coming early. Like there's later scriptures or maybe stuff from the New Testament that's a throwback to this. I don't know.
Well,
And maybe you're like,
I
no,
think
you're just
first
making
of
stuff
all,
up.
No.
first of all, this is the theme. This song is really the theme for 1st and 2nd Samuel. So she's giving us right here. This is what the rest of this story is going to be about with all the kings. This is what you can go back to if you're wondering what the point is, because sometimes it gets convoluted with the cultural context. But this is what the point is.
Yeah. In the text thread last night when you brought up the Beatitudes.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, like, when I'm looking back on my notes this morning after reading this, what I wrote about her song is she's describing the upside down kingdom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like, oh, that's what Rachel was texting
Yeah.
about last night. Yeah. Which is the lens with which we read the New Testament last year, the upside down kingdom. So yeah, that's her song.
I just love that though. I was like, this isn't, like Jesus says, like, everything is fulfilled in me. The law and the prophets, it's all fulfilled in me. It's all leading to me. And his proclamation of what the kingdom looks like isn't new, right? This is what we see about what God's saying. This is what the monarchy in Israel looks like.
Yep.
And it's the same as the kingdom that Jesus proclaims. It's a kingdom where he raises up the poor, where he protects the needy, where the pride have to humble themselves if they want to be a part of his kingdom. It's the same story.
Well, and that's why I was trying to really say, is this song, it speaks of the grander story, not just what happens in 1st and 2nd Samuel. It definitely feels much larger. Like it's
How God works. It's
yeah.
what we've seen in all the books we've already studied, and it's what we see just climaxed and epitomized and fulfilled in Jesus and his kingdom.
Which is why the song that Mary sings in Luke when she encounters her cousin Elizabeth, it's the same thing. It's her version when she's pregnant with Jesus, and her song is very similar. All the same themes are there.
I guess I wonder, is there a connection with this kind of prayer like we saw at the end, like when they left the Exodus, when
The Song of Moses?
or some of the other
It's a
earlier
victory.
songs
It's a song
you
of victory.
see?
Yeah. When
I was just curious, like maybe do they have a similar?
It is similar to all the songs of victory. So
Yeah.
it even, which I actually think is also lovely, because she has gone through her own battle with her, with not having children, and she has been victorious, and she's given her son back to God in faithfulness, and then she's singing this song of victory.
Yeah. When I also searched, I've been dabbling with like AI. I know you're quick to go to it, and I'm like trying to figure out how to adopt this into my life. But like the similarities between her song and Mary's song. So this is what AI helped me pick out. You have the miraculous birth. They both exalt God and who He is. Both songs have themes of reversal, like the upside down kingdom. And come out of this spontaneous praise, but the theme that runs through both is God's mercy to them, God's mercy to His people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what you're saying is like it feels similar. It feels like we've read this before. Yes.
Yes.
But and in some of this, it's not like this weird like mystical thing. I mean, like Mary would have known these stories, would have heard of this. So it's like emulating things that were already a part of, and that's what I mean. Like even Hannah, maybe Hannah was in the tradition, had heard this like these songs.
It's how
so
they
it's like,
right.
There's it's this not a repetition, but it's I don't know.
Well, and it is again. This is we're reading through one cohesive story.
Yeah.
And so the themes really are not going to change, and the values aren't going to change, and how God works doesn't ever change because He's God and this is His story. And so I do think you keep thinking like I've read this before because we sort of have.
Yeah.
It's just a new context, and it's like a bigger part of the story that we're reading.
And they're not just
And you're going to see
things, they're all
Daniel.
ultimately
David. He sort of will bookend the end of 1st and 2nd Samuel with a similar song. So we'll see it again.
We should get AI to do a thing on comparing all the songs, the victory songs.
Victory songs of the Bible.
Different themes. Okay. So we're still in 2. So this was one interesting thing that I picked up on was Eli's sons seems like a random thing. But ultimately it's like they're his demise. But it starts off very early talking about they were priests of Yahweh.
That's right.
But then here, not too far into the very next chapter, they're worthless men because they did not know Yahweh.
That's right.
So it's like here we have priests of Yahweh who don't know Yahweh. And I don't know, just a good stark warning for like, wolves in sheep's clothing and just people who are priests of the Lord that are worthless men who don't know the Lord.
That's right.
Yeah, I think there's a few warnings in there, and one is that for us, just because someone's appointed to a position doesn't mean they know God or have good character.
Oh yeah.
But also that just because a father has good character and is faithful doesn't mean his sons will, and we will see that theme throughout the next couple of books that we read.
Oh yeah.
And so I think Eli sort of is hoping his sons are going to be good, and they're not. And then we'll see the same thing happen with Samuel, actually.
Who Samuel's not, but isn't Jonathan's kind of like, right?
Yeah, he seems to be good, Saul's son. So,
seems to be good.
And Saul isn't good, and Jonathan is good. So, I mean, you aren't your parents. It's about your own decision to be faithful to Yahweh or not.
And so some of the stories about Eli's sons, the way that they like take food from people.
Yeah.
It's not always clear to us that in the sacrificial system, part of the way it worked was provision for the Levitical priests. So yes, when people brought a sacrifice before the Lord, it was an offering to Him, but a portion went to the priest, and that's how they lived. But Eli's sons are
seems excessive.
They have no regard for the heart behind a sacrifice or the provision that the Lord provides for them through it. They're just taking.
They're taking advantage of their position.
That's right.
Which is, there is nothing, I don't know. There's not a lot that makes God more angry than that. See the New Testament with how angry Jesus is with the Pharisees.
Mm-hmm.
If you are supposed to be a representative of God and then you're taking advantage
by force
of the poor and the people, that will get some harsh words.
For sure.
So he ultimately, I guess, comes to recognize that his sons are worthless.
Well, God says, your sons are going to die on the same day.
Yeah.
They're going to be cut off from this priesthood.
God makes him fully aware of it.
That's right.
Maybe he knew or he suspected.
Certainly he knew, but yeah.
But all the while, Samuel is growing up. Mm-hmm. He's around.
Yeah, it's a transition. So it's this corrupt priesthood, and so he's saying, I'm going to bring up someone else to be the priest and to speak on behalf of me in this transition into a monarchy.
And one thing I wondered, what do you think it means when it says ministering before the Lord?
Where are you at? What
And
verse?
this is where am I? 2:18. Samuel was ministering before the Lord. A boy called, it just starts to say that a couple times, like he was ministering before the Lord. And I just wondered, what did that mean?
Yeah, so
to
you'll
minister
see
before the Lord?
in the books, First and Second Samuel, the Ark of the Covenant plays a crucial role. The high priest is the one who annually goes before into the most holy place, and Samuel seems to be, even though he's not a Levite, we read at the beginning, he's from the tribe of Ephraim. He's going to be used by God, not just in the daily activities of the temple to minister before God, the lighting of the candles and the burning of incense and all of that. But God will speak to him because we see in Samuel, he's a judge and a priest and a prophet, all wrapped up in one figure.
He's doing priestly work.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's really just what that phrase is. He's just doing priestly work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then ultimately we have the scene where the Lord calls Samuel.
Yeah, it's wild.
And he like goes in, Eli, like, hey, what's up? What do you need? He's like, dude, I didn't call you. Go back to bed. Go lay down. And he goes back and lay down like, Samuel. He's like, what? So that happens.
Here I am. Here I am.
But then you also have like Eli, who at the end of that, I don't want to say like humbles himself, but to recognize like, oh,
God might be talking.
dude, God might be talking to you, and then ultimately like, dude, you gotta tell me what he said.
Yeah.
Not in a mean, but like he wants to know, and it's not good news for him or his family.
Well, God had already told Eli.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
your
a-
line
it's
is done.
affirming.
Your son, yeah.
Yeah.
And so then Eli's probably like, okay.
That's what I was saying. But you could choose. He could have gone.
Sure.
This seems like a more humble.
Yep. It's an acceptance.
Yeah.
Yeah,
acceptance.
Eli is definitely trying to be faithful
Yeah.
throughout the whole story.
Okay. And then we get to the end here, where there's
The rise of the Philistines.
yeah.
Again.
Yeah. So this is the enemy that we're going to be focused on.
That's right. And that's how Judges ended with Samson and the Philistines. So the Philistines are a primary enemy
Yeah.
for the people of Israel.
But there's this battle. They start to lose. I guess they start to lose.
Yeah,
and they
this
say,
is
like,
just
hey, go
and
get
I
the
think
ark.
the big picture of this is it's just showing us like how the Israelites were using
Yeah.
the Ark of the Covenant and how they were thinking about Yahweh and how they were winning battles and then why they want a king. And he's sort of showing us how distorted their view of who Yahweh was and what it meant to win battles
Yeah.
and thrive as a nation.
They're like, I like my Yahweh like a genie. Like when I
That's
need
right.
him, I go get him, rub
That's
the lamp.
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they did. And so they lose.
Yeah. They lose and they lose the ark.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting though when the ark comes into the camp and they're all shouting and the Philistines like, what's going on over there? And then they're filled with fear.
Yeah, because they knew
They
what
know the
happened. They knew the
story.
stories.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, they have this powerful God. And again, the framework in their minds for a God in the ancient world is different than the kind of the way we think about it. So they have all of these gods and they're trying to like, if we make this one happy in this way, then we'll have the crops or we'll have victory or we'll have whatever. And so they are fearful because they know the stories of this God of Israel. And so then rather than tuck tail and run, they say, well, we're going to, I think it says like, be men, Philistines, and fight, like die with honor. And they go to do that, but they're victorious.
Take courage and be men, O Philistines, lest you become slaves to the Hebrews.
Like they've been slaves to you.
Yep.
And they also, in this time, again, they thought that these images or idols had power. You know, they worshipped images and idols, and that's how they were treating the Ark of the Covenant. And, you know, there is no image, there's no idol. This was supposed to be where God's very presence was with them. That reminded them of the law and who they were as people. And instead of that reminding them of God's presence and trusting in his presence, they used the actual object and thinking that was what had power.
How did they get it out? It seems so weird that, like, okay, we got to build this tent, the temple, like this very specific thing. Only certain people can go in, be near it. And here they are, like, just run up there and grab it and bring it out here.
Yeah, so it was carried on poles. So
I know, but doesn't that seem like...
Yeah, they're treating, like Rachel's saying, the Ark of the Covenant.
Which
like
was
the gold,
inside, inside there was like a more elaborate space that it resided inside, and they just grabbed it.
And they can just go in there, like that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Normally, it was like only certain people can go in there, and if they haven't done it the right way, dude, boom, they're going to be dead.
Right.
But here, some guys just run in and grab it and go, and everything's hunky dory.
They're treating it like the golden calf back in Exodus.
Yeah.
It's like this object.
Yes.
This
is what is going to save us.
Yep.
This is what's going to go before us in victory. And now he's like, nope. Watch and see what happens whenever you don't know who it is who's protecting you and who your king is.
Yeah. I did think it was just because what we were saying earlier in chapter 4:18, as soon as he had mentioned the Ark of God, this is to Eli, the guy that came back from Eli fell over backward from his seat by the side of the gate, see where he had been before. Mm-hmm. It's like his resting place. And his neck was broken and he died, for the man was old and heavy.
Oh, yeah.
But it also said, and he had judged Israel first, so he was a judge before. He was also a priest, judge.
He was the religious leader.
Okay.
Whenever it describes him sitting at the temple, it's almost described like a throne. He was definitely the leader.
Okay. But not like the Judges we read about in Judges, but maybe less of the same cyclical stuff.
Yeah, and you can also think of like Moses, in a sense, was the one who judged, who presided over and ruled. But he was also priestly in that he went before God for the people. Yeah. We've seen this before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a tribal leader, and that had priestly functions and sometimes warrior functions, depending on what they needed.
So let's say focus a little bit on the ark. It's this idol, and here it gets captured and taken by the Philistines.
Who then treat it like an idol.
An idol.
That's right.
And so they go and put it in where I guess there's these other idols. Or
in their own temple.
In their own temple.
Yeah. As if the God, the Elohim of Israel, is now subject to their God.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you would, after you capture a king in another battle, chain him up and keep him in the throne room as a pet. It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
They're doing the same thing as the Israelites.
Yep.
And God isn't for necessarily the Israelites or the Philistines in battle, which we should remember at football games. He is, right?
Why do you say that?
I'm just joking.
Okay.
But he's not for anyone winning. He's for those who submit themselves to him.
There you go. Yes.
And who love and honor him.
Yeah.
You know, he's not hoping for this team to win. He's not on the Philistine side now because they won. And so then he says, you don't know who I am either. And it's definitely not about the ark. It's about me. And so then he defeats them without the Israelites. He doesn't use the Israelites. He just defeats them.
Yeah.
Tumors, cancer, death.
Yeah.
He has lots of ways.
Pestilence. Yeah.
But even the whole like this, their God laying down and then they like stand it back up and then they go the next time and it's like broken off a little more and then they like try and fix it. It's like it keeps like even the idols, right? Like that's
their images. It's like this is the point.
Even the images, no. All right.
Every time they move it to a new town, the people like get that thing out of here. Yeah.
It's bad. Because I guess God, ultimately it's still God fulfilling his purposes through,
so then
getting rid of the Philistines.
So I think the question before us, you read the Old Testament, there's a lot of narrative, there's stories, we're trying to wrap our minds around the big picture, but this is still good for our hearts. You can stop at the end of a week like this and ask yourself, in what ways do I think of God or treat him like the Israelites have? In what ways do I try to manipulate me being one of his people or him being for me, quote, for gain that's really not something he has in mind?
Yeah.
So there is heart work for all of us to do here when we read these stories. It still tells us truth about who God is and reveals truth about our own brokenness.
Yeah, that's a good word.
You can subscribe to receive additional resources to help you study the story of Scripture at clearcreekresources.org. We'll see you next week.